dispersed a protest in the occupied city of Enerhodar. Video obtained by the BBC shows explosions going off in the town center. Some residents have reportedly also been detained, and hundreds of people have escaped from Mariupol. Tens of thousands of residents are trapped in the city, but rescue efforts by the Red Cross have once again stalled. The plan was to bring in dozens of buses filled with desperately needed food and medicine. Our Susan Ormiston is in Lviv. And Susan, let's start with Kiev and the surrounding area and what we're hearing about the struggle for that piece of land.
Well, the Kiev region, according to Ukraine's deputy defense minister tonight, is totally under Ukrainian control. But the president is warning that the retreating or withdrawing Russian forces left a really catastrophic trail. He's warning, among other things, that mines may be hidden in homes, in equipment, even in corpses that litter some of the streets. And we're hearing some pretty horrific reports of what happened in those suburbs, in Bucha, in Irpin, places like Hostomel. The mayor of Bucha says that a mass grave may hold the bodies of 300 people, and many of them were wearing white armbands, which suggests they were unarmed, and some of them were as young as 14. And these advances as well don't in any way signal the war is over, just that it has moved, of course, from that northwest area around Kyiv to the east and south, where shelling continued today.
With so many things to worry about, mines as well. Now, there's a lot of attention that we've been paying here to the evacuation of Mariupol. Would it be fair to call that stalled right now?
Certainly extremely troubled. International Red Cross team that was to go in yesterday and were turned back, tried to get there today. They didn't get to the city, so they've backed off and they're trying to go in tomorrow. It's a small team, but they're trying to escort a convoy of buses and citizens who are trying desperately to get out of that city. And there's difficult negotiations, even as those humanitarian corridors are supposed to be negotiated and navigated. Teams from the Red Cross have not been able to get in yet. So very difficult. And I'll tell you, I spoke to a woman who got out of Mariupol some days ago, and she said one thing to me that stuck with me. She said, there is no Mariupol left. She said it's a city of basements.
And an area that we haven't heard quite so much about in this country, an area near a vital body of water, Enerhodar. There's some kind of resistance there. What are you hearing about that?
You may remember, actually, that Enerhodar, which is near one of Europe's biggest nuclear plant, they have had a pattern of resistance there. And today there was another pro-Ukrainian anti-invasion protest, and boy, the message from the Russian troops that are occupying that city, they sent explosives into the crowd, possibly stun grenades, clearing that what was deemed a peaceful protest from the center of the city. So clearly the resistance is not going to be tolerated in these Russian occupied towns. And we forget sometimes, with the fight going on in other parts of the country, that along that southern corridor there are several cities that are entirely operated now by Russian troops, and they're digging in and they're trying to control the population of those cities.
The ebbs and flows of this conflict, and all of it laced with violence. Thank you for this, Susan.
You're welcome.
For some fleeing the war, quick and accessible health care is essential. Some of the people providing that care are Canadian doctors and nurses, and at least one of those is there on his own dime. Selena Shivji reports from the Poland-Ukraine border.
As Ukrainians fleeing the war stream into this halfway steps from Poland, the exhaustion is clear on their faces. Tucked into the corner beside a soup kitchen is a field clinic staffed by Canadians ready to spring into action.
I think she needs a sling.
ER physicians like Anthony Fong volunteering his time and paying his own way to work in a war zone.
We'll put the sat probe on her.
This woman stops to get her blood pressure taken. She spent 2 grueling days to get here, a 1,200-kilometer journey from Donetsk.
Heart sounds are good. Yep, heart sounds are good.
She says she's dizzy, dehydrated, and so tired. In the end, she's not in need of medical care, just perhaps some comfort. The team understands, Fong says.
People's lives are turned upside down. They have to pick up the pieces of their lives and start anew in a new place. And
the work here is stop and start. But even on the doctor's birthday, his last 12-hour shift before heading back home,
there's nowhere else I'd rather be.
The Canadian Medical Assistant Teams, an NGO, is used to working in disaster zones after earthquakes and hurricanes, not conflict zones. And it's an adjustment, says Teresa Berdusco, a registered nurse from Edmonton.
And thankfully, we are well away from the conflict zone, like the danger area per se, but it can change tomorrow. And it moves fast.
Russian troops came with the guns.
Much too fast for Katya Trusova. The team's translator traveled from Texas to help, but she's originally from Kherson in southern Ukraine, and her mother is stuck there.
She walks every day 6 kilometers to get water.
Unable to escape the city under Russian control.
Just destroyed completely.
The videos her mother sends out are devastating. This one of a shopping center Trusova knows well that's now in ruins. The work she does here with the Canadians is personal.
Whatever, how I can be useful, I will do my part. But I will tell you that to be like, especially in Ukrainian territory, it feels so good.
To be under the same sky as her mother, as close as she can get.
And be together.
When there's a lull in patience, the women manning the food stall next door fill the void. The emotion spills over as they belt out Ukraine's national anthem, and the crowd assembled stands at attention, some with hands over their hearts. Fong takes out his phone and starts filming. A moving reminder that the help he's providing is sorely needed for hundreds of thousands of displaced Ukrainians. Salima Shivji, CBC News, at Ukraine's border with Poland.
The latest COVID-19 modeling from the federal government suggests we're about to see an increase in cases in this country again. The more infectious Omicron BA2 subvariant is now circulating widely. Kashif Prasada is an emergency room doctor in Toronto, and he says we're at the start of another wave.
The uptick in cases, wastewater surveillance is up. We're starting to see an uptick in admissions in hospital in Ontario. But that definitely means that, there's definitely an increase in cases. Some estimates put it at, in Ontario, about 40,000 people might have COVID right now. And that's just going to increase until it goes through the population again, like it did in January.
Scientists are also keeping an eye on another new COVID variant, XE. It was first detected in the UK on January 19th, and more than 600 cases have been confirmed there since then. The XE strain is believed to be 10% more contagious than BA2. Approximately 1 in 66 Canadians are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, according to a recent federal government report. On World Autism Awareness Day, this neurodevelopmental condition is often poorly understood, and a new study highlights the uneven funding for autism services and the impacts of COVID-19. Philip Lee Shannock reports.
This has been a really, really hard year for Ryder.
Ryder Alma and his classmates used googly eyes and pipe cleaners to create characters out of sponges. His mom, Joy Alma, a volunteer coordinator with Autism Ontario, says the pandemic disrupted a lot of his routines.
He's really suffered a lot of regressions, and then coming out of the pandemic, it's really set him back.
And so it was really a perfect storm.
A study released today found that COVID-19 caused a huge disruption for families with autistic children. But Janet McLaughlin of Wilfrid Laurier University's Autism Research Consortium says it also coincided with an increase in wait times in Ontario.
Every few years, it seems the government changes the funding model, and that causes a lot of stress.
Just before the pandemic, the province switched to a needs-based model. A provincial spokesperson said of the more than 53,000 children enrolled in the Ontario Autism Program, 645 families are receiving core clinical services, and that assessing individual needs can take time. McLaughlin says her study found that parents described what seemed like never-ending wait lists.
And waiting for years to get that therapy can impact their long-term outcomes.
McLaughlin says caregivers reported spending an average of 15 hours per week advocating and navigating care for their children.
What parents are asking for is needs-based services with minimal wait times, and that requires a major investment in funds.
Julian Bonnet's 8-year-old daughter and 17-year-old son are both autistic. For his master's degree at Laurentian University, he's researching how challenging it is for families to access early intensive autism therapy in areas like Sudbury.
They weren't available, we couldn't find them, and now we're starting to have some more issues with some behavioral challenges and cognitive challenges because they haven't learned some of those strategies when they were younger.
Those challenges don't end when they become adults, says Calgary musician Bruce Petherick of Autism Canada. but autism support abruptly ends at 18 across the country.
And that's manifestly unfair. It's as if they don't think we grow up.
And while he says people with autism are diverse, with the right support and opportunities, there's nothing stopping them from living happy, fulfilling lives. Philip Shannock, CBC News, Toronto.
In Thunder Bay, there are calls for the city's police service to be disbanded. They come from leaders representing 2/3 of all First Nations in Ontario, all while the force faces external investigations and a growing number of human rights complaints. The CBC's Logan Turner with this.
Trust is broken.
Reg Niganabi is the Grand Council Chief for the Anishinaabe Nation.
The Thunder Bay Police Service leaves a trail of inadequate investigations, a negligently managed record system, and a lack of substantive oversight.
He says Indigenous people in Thunder Bay no longer trust the police force, and he sees no other option than completely dismantling the service. The call comes after decades of concerns raised by Indigenous people about the ways they've been treated by police and reports that found evidence of systemic racism in the force. Now, under Ontario law, there are 2 ways the service could be disbanded. The Police Oversight Board could vote to make that happen, although at this point that appears unlikely given Board Chairperson Oliver's statement at a press conference last month.
I don't particularly agree that this police service should be disbanded.
The second option is through the Ontario Civilian Police Commission, the police watchdog agency that has that kind of authority and has an active investigation into the Thunder Bay Police. Matthew Torgine is a distinguished fellow at the University of Toronto. He says he's not aware of any commission investigations that have actually resulted in the complete dismantling of the police service in Ontario, but says the attention focused on Thunder Bay is rather unprecedented.
What we have here now is constant drip, if you will, of concerns being raised by either the community or through various reports and reviews that have gone on for some time.
For University of Ottawa professor Michael Kempa, the situation in Thunder Bay feels rather similar. He pointed to Northern Ireland, where the police service underwent a complete rebuild in the early 2000s. That force faced deep mistrust from the Irish Catholic community and had a long, troubling history.
So it's similar in the sense that once you have attempted reform multiple times, you do get to a stage where there's so little trust that reforming the existing institution almost becomes a non-starter. It's an institutional impossibility. You're very often better off starting from scratch.
Now, there's no indication at this time that could happen in Thunder Bay. The police chief and chair of the police board have both said they're working hard to transform and improve the service to build back trust with Indigenous communities. They're also holding an emergency meeting this weekend to discuss the latest calls for disbandment. But Indigenous leaders have been firm in saying they've seen enough.
There needs to be not just discussion, but concrete action.
Logan Turner, CBC News, Thunder Bay.
The Pope's apology for the conduct of some Roman Catholic Church members at residential schools is still sinking in for many survivors. The move comes 7 years after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission called on the pontiff to say sorry. Although an official apology has yet to come on Canadian soil, Pope says he is coming here. All of this has compelled one survivor to ask the CBC's Olivia Stefanovich to share a part of his story. But first, a warning, there may be some triggering details on this for some listeners.
I got this at 5 years old. My mom didn't know that they cut me.
The faint marks of 17 stitches run along a deep scar across the right side of Norman Yakeula's abdomen.
This is what I live with every day. I'm reminded what happened to me.
Yakeula, who recently changed his last name from Yakelaya back to his traditional surname, says he was sent to hospital by supervisors at Grolier Hall, the first year attending the Roman Catholic-run residential school in Inuvik, Northwest Territories.
I was crying for my mom.
But Yakeula says she only found out when he went home for the summer.
My mom was giving us a bath in the bathtub.